And I told Michael, I said, you know, man, this thing better be good, because if it isn't, they're gonna kill you.
It's hard to shock Hollywood. Drugs, sex, even embezzlement are all excused as just another part of the business. It takes a lot in this town to ruin a career. But there is one sin for which Hollywood has always been unforgiving: failure.
I went to this party, it was given by Michael Douglas, and there were a lot of people, a lot of directors there and producers, and most of these people were the more of the arty bend, which was UA's type of, they would do films that UA would finance, and they weren't getting their films green-lighted. And they were told because of all the money was going to Michael, and they were furious. And I went back and I said, and I told Michael, I said, you know, man, this thing better be good, because if it isn't, they're gonna kill you.
Michael Cimino returned to Hollywood 6 months after The Deer Hunter had swept the Oscars, confident that he had shot another masterpiece. United Artists also remained committed to Cimino and his vision. Despite the turmoil of production, they still believed in Heaven's Gate. All that remained was to edit down the mountain of footage Michael Cimino had shot.
When we got back, we had, it's quite funny actually, we had bars put up on the cutting room windows. And then we had all the locks changed so that nobody could come in. He said, you know, we're not showing it to them, you know. I'm not showing it to them till I'm ready. He wasn't afraid of anybody, you know. And I mean, sometimes we'd be there and a call would come in from somebody, and he would, you know, he'd get on the phone and he'd scream and yell and swear at them and tell them this and that and the other, and, you know, they weren't going to mess with him, and he'd slam down the phone, and then he'd just turn to me and he'd smile, you know, and we'd just keep going.
For month after month, Michael Cimino and UA had locked horns. They had fought over casting, schedule, budget. That there was now tension during editing surprised no one. Nevertheless, it took its toll. After nearly a year of production on Heaven's Gate, David Field resigned from United Artists. He gave no official reason for his departure, other than to say it was for personal reasons.
I have one regret in my life, in my working life, and that's that I left United Artists. I don't know what would have happened had I stayed. Maybe nothing would have changed. But I fault myself for walking away in the middle of that.
With David Field gone, Stephen Bach was left as the sole executive in charge of production at UA. One of his first tasks was to oversee the shooting of even more film on Heaven's Gate. By completing principal photography according to UA's imposed schedule and budget, Michael Cimino had won the right to shoot the movie's prologue, Graduation Day at Harvard, 20 years before the main action of the film. Shot in Oxford, England, after Harvard refused permission, the prologue was as complicated and ambitious as anything shot in Montana. The only difference was that UA severely limited the time and money they gave Cimino.
At the end of every day's shooting, a phone call went out from Oxford to tell me that the day's shooting had been completed on budget and on schedule. And Michael had been told, if I get a call that says we shot 5 minutes longer than we said we would, and we spent $500 more than we said we would, I will pull the plug, and there will be no prologue, there will be no epilogue. And Michael believed it. A little late in the game. Little late in the game.
Michael Cimino had entered the editing room with over 1 million feet of film, some 220 hours of footage. From that, he was contractually obligated to deliver a final cut no longer than 3 hours in length. Editing this amount of film under normal circumstances would have been a Herculean task, but UA made it nearly impossible by demanding that Cimino make their Christmas release.
Well, Christmas because of the Oscars. Always the Oscars. That's the big drive with any film of any importance. You want to make that December release. And we worked, there weren't enough hours. We never stopped. There were days where we would go 3 days without sleeping. And so when you get to that point, you don't really know what you're doing anyway, because you're just so tired.
In late June, after 8 months of editing, Michael Cimino announced that he was ready to show the executives at United Artists Heaven's Gate.
We got to the screening room and we saw Michael, spoke with Michael. I thought Michael looked exhausted, truly, truly depleted. I remember asking, how close are we to a final cut? And he said, it's a little long. I can lose maybe 15 minutes. And we sat down and we watched the movie. And the movie that we saw was 5 hours and 25 minutes long. The battle sequence alone was as long as most feature motion pictures. I was angry. The company had been put through turmoil. Other projects had gotten canceled or never made. Relationships within the company were deeply strained, some of them irreparably. The company was exposed in the industry at large in a way that few companies have been. And the internal hope that had kept us all going for those 2 or 3 years of this process now, which was that it was going to be a masterpiece and that would justify everything that we had gone through, was suddenly gone.
Michael Cimino re-entered his editing room to begin another round of 18-hour days. Access to him became impossible. By mid-October, he had brought his epic down to just over 3.5 hours. Amazingly, no one at UA, not Stephen Bach, not Andy Olbeck, no one saw the final version of Heaven's Gate before its release. Insisting on doing so was useless anyway. No changes could be made without endangering the New York premiere. Michael Cimino had gotten final cut.
I can remember going to the first screening, the premiere in New York, and we were all very excited, and Mike was quite anxious because I don't know if he even saw the film before it was shown. It was wet right out of the soup. He had just put it together, and you just barely made the deadline to get it all together. And the movie comes on.
Good morning, Mr. Abrams.
Morning, George. Miss Eggleston.
I remember my first impression of seeing it was, this kind of the splendor of it was wonderful, but the rhythm of it was so unusual and so kind of slow and not what you expected to see that the audience certainly was frustrated. Then you heard that terrible applause at the end. It was just, it was terrible. And then hearing the next day we got up, and on the way to the airport, we were going up to Toronto for the next show, and picking up that review on the way to the airport and reading it.